Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, great to see you again. And thank you for being here this morning. One of the things that I want to bring up is this issue of vehicle technology and cybersecurity. You know, these new connective vehicles, as they're called, particularly in light of the fact that China has emerged now as the largest exporter of vehicles globally, including here in the United States. And Mr. Secretary, I have to tell you, I'm concerned about the potential security risk of these connective vehicles built by the Chinese automakers and now operating in the United States, because through their massive subsidies and workforce practices, as I said, they've become the largest exporter. They're here. And these vehicles literally have the capability of being manipulated and manipulating the vehicle's life and safety systems, collect and transmit data, and implement surveillance capabilities embedded within the vehicle's technology. Now, I know the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party has sent a letter to the Department of Commerce and the Department of Defense issuing those concerns about these vehicles. Can you talk a little bit about what DOT, maybe NHTSA, whoever can really help here in America ensure, like the Chinese are doing, any vehicle data collected in China has to be stored locally. Are we requiring anything like that?
Thank you for the question. It touches on something we take very seriously, which is the safety implications of vehicle cybersecurity issues. The reality is that vehicles are becoming more and more complex and more software intensive each passing year. There's already probably been more computerization on board than many consumers were aware of, but that is only increasing. NHTSA was involved in establishing a body called the Auto ISAC, an industry data sharing partnership, which is committed to quickly identifying and responding to cybersecurity risks and threats in the nation's vehicle fleet. And NHTSA has refreshed its own updated cybersecurity best practices, which we also believe is a contribution to this issue. Working with a number of stakeholders and also updating a cybersecurity incident response plan, which makes more clear the agency's responsibilities in the event of a cyber attack or any issue that would involve safety critical systems there. I think that going forward, we need to continue assessing how best to protect consumers without, of course, hindering the technological developments that can make vehicles safer, more convenient. There's a lot of consumer demand for this. But
did they say anything about collecting data here locally, keep it in America as opposed to going back to the CCP?
I'm not aware of restrictions in terms of how data is stored. Of course, most of our international automakers are not Chinese automakers, but you also know how many different components are finding their way into any vehicle, regardless of the OEM. So that's certainly an area that we'd welcome more dialogue on and be eager to work on.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to flip over to the EV standards and really talk about the CAFE standards that have recently been announced that everyone is, I don't want to say, I might say up in arms about, because nowhere in law did Congress authorize DOT to set fuel economy standards that effectively mandate EVs while at the same time will force the internal combustion engine out of the market. In fact, Mr. Secretary, federal statute expressly prohibits NHTSA from considering the fuel economy of EVs when determining maximum feasible CAFE standards for passenger cars and trucks. Now, can you give me a little update on the CAFE standards? What are they finally going to boil down to? And how does DOT plan to implement such a massive move to EVs without consumer buy-in, really? Because as we've all seen, so few really want to buy them at this point.
Well, I do think it's important to note that every year more Americans choose EVs than the year before, and very few Americans who choose an EV decide to go back. But I do want to agree and note that, as you correctly stated, NHTSA does not take EVs into account when it's formulating CAFE standards. They're about the quality of an internal combustion engine. The rule that was proposed would require a fleet-wide average of 58 miles per gallon by 2032. I know that seems aggressive, but frankly, every CAFE...
To say the least.
Yeah, but that's exactly what they said when we outrageously suggested that you could get 20 miles a gallon back in the 80s or 90s. So every time we raise the bar, we find that industry is able to meet it. And it's remarkable the innovation that goes on. But ultimately, we believe these are about not just cleaner air, but saving Americans money by having more efficient gas engines. And we know that these gas cars are going to be on the road a long time, even as the EV market share grows, which is part of why we continue to think it's important to meet our statutory responsibility with the CAFE standards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Watson-Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations